Okay, welcome back to another episode of Environmental History Worth Reading. This is our January 2015 episode. I'm Sean Courage, an editor here at niche-canada.org, and I'm joined by Jessica.
Yeah, I'm Jessica DeWitt, and I'm the niche social media editor.
So, Jessica, you have been scouring the internet, monitoring Twitter, taking a look at the Google Pluses, and you've come up with 5 picks for articles and media online that you thought was worth reading for the environmental history community. And the first one is very seasonally appropriate. It comes here from The Atlantic. It's called Blizzards and the Birth of the Modern Mayor.
Yeah, so the blizzard that hit the East Coast a couple weeks ago incited a lot of articles about the blizzard of 1888. And so this blizzard was a disaster that caught the residents of New York and New England unprepared. And about 400 people died, many ships sank, cities were paralyzed for weeks. Um, and in this article, they demonstrate that before this blizzard, um, urban citizens kind of felt that they were sheltered from the forces of Mother Nature, that they really couldn't be touched by extreme weather. And this blizzard illustrated that in all actuality, some of the modern conveniences that they depended on made them even more susceptible to extreme weather. Public transportation shut down, electricity was no longer running, etc. And the article argues that this led to the modern mayor who comes in and is all heroic, and I'm going to make sure that services keep going and whatnot. Kind of like how Bill de Blasio in New York the last couple weeks has done the same thing. So
Right.
before that, people expected mayors not to really do much, and after this blizzard, they expected mayors to make sure that cities keep running.
This is a super interesting article and definitely timely for this time of year. I think we see this in Canadian cities, American cities across the
Mhm.
continent. This sort of symbolic, heroic mayor who is
Yes.
supposed to be steadfast in the face of natural calamity.
Hmm. Yes.
We stay in the state of New York with a post on the New York History blog about fracking.
Yeah, so in December, New York's governor, Andrew Cuomo, banned hydraulic fracking in the state. And, environmentalists find this to be a great thing, but there's also a lot of controversy because if New York isn't fracking their own oil and gas, they're bringing it in from places like Pennsylvania where it's very prevalent.
Hmm.
So really is the economic benefit, I mean, the ecological benefit really there. So in this article, Bruce Dearstein argues that Cuomo's decision follows in the tradition of New York governors who relied on expert scientific reports and a basis for making a policy on hard environmental issues. So he goes through a couple of examples in the article of different governors and the scientific reports that they had made and the way that they used those to form policy. So,
And this would be really interesting for scholars in history of science as well.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Moving over to Carl Zimmering's website, you've got a piece here on the Memphis sanitation workers strike.
Mm-hmm. So he posted this on Martin Luther King Day, I believe, and it's based on a chapter from his upcoming book, Clean and White: A History of Environmental Racism in the United States from Monticello to Memphis. So in the post, he talks about the 1968 Memphis sanitation workers strike and the importance of sanitation work in general in Memphis and other southern cities that had a history of epidemic diseases like yellow fever. And he demonstrates that this work was considered too dirty and too dangerous for white citizens. So it was relegated mainly to an African American employment. And he just shows how this strike kind of really brought out the racist undertones surrounding sanitation work
Hmm.
and connects it today, saying that people of color continue to make up a disproportionate amount of the labor force handling Americans' waste.
This is a
So,
really good example of work in environmental history that deals with questions of race and racism in American history. Because I know that, I guess it was within the last month, there had been some discussion online about where environmental history fits in the history of race and racism.
mhm. Yep.
Coming up next, I'm going to say this is the weirdest one that you picked so far. Here's why 76 beavers were forced to skydive into the Idaho wilderness in 1948. What is this about?
Yeah, so this was really popular. I had people coming up to me saying, read that post you posted about the beavers. And so after World War II, people began moving into previously undeveloped land in Idaho. And of course, this land was inhabited by beavers. And the beavers and this development butted heads. So the Idaho residents demanded that the Idaho Fish and Game Department start rehoming the beavers into uh, deeper sections of wilderness. So at the time, Idaho's countryside was not heavily eroded. Most of it was inaccessible. And at first, they started rehoming these beavers using pack horses and mules in a very complex system of transport. And that just left all the animals and the humans involved really, really annoyed and bitter. So they wanted to find an easier, cheaper, and more humane way to transport these beavers. So they came up with this brilliant idea to use planes and surplus army parachutes. And they dropped 76 beavers down into the wilderness of Idaho. I guess the boxes opened once they hit the ground, and the article shows little diagrams of where they put them. And there's only one casualty, and the rest of the beavers successfully started anew in this new place. So
Yeah, I was just looking at the diagram of the
yeah.
boxes now, and of course for viewers, if you didn't know, the beaver in the boxes here is they're plummeting from the airplane, but with the parachutes,
Hmm. Hmm.
safely into the Idaho wilderness. All right, wrapping things up this month, we've got a pick on whaling and British Columbia's uncomfortable relationship with its whaling history.
Yeah, so the author has been working at the Maritime Museum of BC, and she states in the article that she's noticed that people seem to be really interested in the sexier topics like shipwrecks or naval battles. But more uncomfortable topics, like the way in which BC has used the sea for economic gain, kind of make people uncomfortable and they're not quite as interested in it. Um, so she goes into the briefly into the history of whaling in British Columbia, and she ends by stating that the purpose of history is not allowed to allow us to pick and choose which stories we like and therefore which stories we tell. Though is not this is what inevitably occurs. History happened. There's nothing we can do to change that. And I think that environmental historians are particularly um, used to tackling those uncomfortable subjects. In fact, sometimes I see the articles about how do we make environmental history less depressing, and sometimes it's just not possible, and then sometimes it
Sure.
is. But I just thought it was a good article and one that makes the case readily accessible.
Yeah, it's a great article, and I hadn't thought about that. I mean, the degree to which maritime museums tend to be focused on shipbuilding and naval escapades, and the economic uses of the sea aren't often the main focus of maritime museum exhibits. So it's a great
Hmm.
piece and eye-opening for British Columbians, I think.
Yes.
So another great list of 5 that readers can find over at niche-canada.org from ENVHIST worth reading for January 2015. Thanks so much, Jessica.
Thanks, Sean.